Welcome to Church History for Chumps. My name is John Simon, and I'm here with probably if I had a personal like Mount Rushmore of my favorite people to host a podcast with. One is the legendary Thomas Duell, of course.
What's going on?
And then one is a guy who I remember when we had a podcast, Taylor.
I do. What did we call it?
Do you remember what it was called?
Between a rock and a hard place.
No. Between the rock and a hard place.
Jesus.
It was wordplay. Yes.
The rock.
Exactly.
Amen.
Exactly. Yeah. So we got a good friend of mine. I've known Taylor for over a decade. Has been a good buddy of mine. Guy who's we've been kind of co-laborers in ministry, always different churches. But yeah, Taylor, why don't you tell the Chump Nation a little bit about your where you're at right now?
The Chump Nation. Oh, I love it. Yeah. So my name's Taylor. I am currently serving as a worship leader at a church in Upland, California. But what I do by day, I work at Gateway Seminary, where I also attend and in the MDiv program. And you're going to laugh. I haven't actually told you my official job title yet.
No, janitor?
That would be cleaner. It's administrative assistant to the vice president of student services.
Oh, do you work for Dwight Schrute?
That's what my dad said.
You're like his underling.
I thought my dad would say, "I'm proud of you," but he just said, "That sounds awfully close to a joke."
Does it take 2 name tags to fit all that?
3. 3. My business card is a 5x7.
Oh, that's good. What tradition is that school? Is that Methodist?
Oh, it's Southern Baptist, baby. We're the 6th Southern Baptist school. Ed Stetzer actually posted on Facebook the other day about the rankings of the attendance of the various seminaries, and we're number 10. We're the 10th largest seminary in North America.
Is volume a good gauge for seminary quality? I don't know.
Oh man,
we're the biggest one in town. Oh, okay. Great. What does that mean?
You know, we kind of have a thing going for us being the smallest SBC school, right? It's like we're small. We're like out on the West Coast, kind of isolated from all the drama in the South. People literally don't know about us. Like we're at the annual Baptist convention where there's quite literally 10,000 Southern Baptist leaders all there, and they walk by our booth and they're like, "I've never heard of you guys before."
You guys changed your name a few years back, right?
Yeah, we used to be Golden Gate. That's
right. I remember Golden Gate. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we got a couple icebreakers to kind of initiate Taylor into the cauldron here. A little gauntlet for him. So I'm going to ask you a question, Taylor. You know the rules. You can only answer it in 10 words or less. And if you break those rules, you'll be exited from the show. So
I just have to say, who did you do this with last? You did the same.
Jacob, my buddy Jacob.
My dad said he listened to that episode and he said Jacob couldn't keep it under about 200 words. So if you can beat 200 words, then you're.
Here's the thing. I know Jacob's going to be listening to this because he follows our show very religiously, but because we. He messed up the first time, and then he was like, "Oh shoot, I went over the 10-word limit," and I was like, "Yeah, man, it's okay. Let's just try it again." And he just did it again. He just sailed over 10 words. But that was also a great episode. I love him, and I love this guy. So, but yeah, all right. So Taylor, question number 1. Quite a few people, having followed our podcast and knowing that Tommy and I have a kind of reformed lean, have reached out to us saying, "Hey, I go to a Baptist church, but now you guys have me thinking that maybe I should look for something from the Reformed persuasion. In 10 words or less, tell them to stay."
Are you serious?
10 words or less, big dog. Sorry, man. You wanted to be on the show.
Oh my gosh.
10 words or less.
What is drawing you to a Reformed church? Question mark.
So you're just gonna ask them?
Church history for chumps.
Okay, all right.
Do I get to elaborate or no? Like that's it.
But that defeats the point. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I can go again. Please stay.
Good. That was really good. Thomas, do you have a question?
Yeah, and this is gonna really make people wonder, like, why did we just bring Taylor on here to bully him or what? But, like,
it's fine
Taylor,
with me.
You can take this question and actually turn it into something really, really good if you'd like, or not. It's up to you. I'm going to ask you a question in 8 words that you have to answer in 10 words or less. Why are you the way that you are? There's so many different ways you can take this. Okay, I'm teeing you up right now. This could be a really good thing. Why are you the way that you are? And I'll just say this. I think you're awesome. I think you're the greatest.
Yeah. Taylor, come on.
Crippling anxiety forces. Let me cook. Crippling anxiety forces deep introspective. Okay, yeah. Crippling anxiety forces deep introspection. 5, baby.
All right, that
Nice.
was good.
I like it.
Don't leave your Baptist church.
It felt like you were like spelling out a business acronym, like you were leading a seminar, and you were like, "Here's crippling anxiety forces."
Okay, you have to understand, I am bad at counting, and poor Jacob, I resonated with this. I was in special needs math in elementary school. That's not a joke either, dude.
Oh my gosh. So guys, our topic for today we're gonna be continuing our tour through the early church. That's right, our series called The Early Church Gets the Worm. We're talking about the one, the only, the Augustine of Hippo. Big fan of this guy. So yeah, jump on board and we're gonna go into it. So as we've taken a trip through the early centuries of church history, we've seen seemingly both sides of the spiritual coin, as it were. We've seen men like Justin Martyr, who were men of philosophy, drawn to the abundance of wisdom in the gospel and how it supersedes worldly ideologies. These men were thinkers, they were writers, they were students. And then we have men like Anthony of the Desert, who were men of passion, drawn to the extraordinary in the Christian gospel. Those were those who explored the depths of the mystery of faith through fasting and prayer and asceticism, the mystics, the monks, the prayer warriors, if you will. Isn't that what they still call them, prayer warriors, Taylor?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Prayer gladiators.
Gladiators. And then we have this guy Augustine. And what I'll say about Augustine that I really love about him is that he seems like this perfect blend of these two kind of Christian hero archetypes. He is a thinker for sure. He's a very learned and educated dude, but he's also a feeler. And if you've ever read like a single line out of Confessions, you'll know that he's a feeler. He cries a lot. He seems like he's very much in tune with his emotions. I mean, Confessions is basically like a diary where he's bummed he can't sleep with his girlfriend anymore, but for very good, wholesome Christian reasons. So yeah, he's a man for the people. He's someone we can all really relate to. Augustine is probably the most well-known theologian from this era of the church, and I think that most church historians would probably put him on their theologian Mount Rushmore. Tommy, where are you putting Augustine on your personal Mount Rushmore? Is he there?
Oh, dude, he's very high on the list.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think as far as theologians go, and not just like a notable pastor that I like, like Polycarp, right? He's like, I like Polycarp, but like, I mean, Augustine, it's hard to overstate his influence on not just not just like the parts of the church that we find ourselves in, like in particular, like Augustine's influence on Calvin is really profound. So if you like Calvin, you kind of default have to like Augustine to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
But his influence just on Western civilization as well. I mean, he's one of those big movers in history. I mean, his thinking shaped the world in similar ways to the Apostle Paul. I think you could argue.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm pretty sure Augustine is claimed by every major wing of the church. So Roman Catholics, Protestants, and the Eastern Orthodox all like him, and so that's
Everybody.
always a good sign.
Yeah. Dude, Augustine gives me big, like, your favorite rapper's favorite rapper vibes, where it's like, whether it's your favorite pastor's favorite dude to read, like, you know, yeah, like you said, the reformers loved him. Like Luther loved him, Calvin loved him, Zwingli probably loved him before he got iced. You know, just seems like he's everybody's favorite guy. Yeah.
He's definitely a titan, if not the titan, right? Like you said, he was kind of like the only guy operating in that era. I know he was the only like pastor, but you know, church history's sake. And as Tommy pointed out, everybody sort of claims him, which I think is interesting. So like I personally put him on my Mount Rushmore, like right next to Mark Driscoll, you know?
Mm.
You took that with a straight face.
This is why this isn't a video podcast, because I just nodded because I was looking at my place in my notes. I was like, all right, Taylor's talking, time for me to find my notes.
John was so uncomfortable with that, he had to tell our audio listeners why he was nodding.
Gosh dang it, bro.
Right up there with them.
Oh, that's good. Oh, man. Yeah. No, Augustine contributed significantly to a handful of doctrines that have shaped pretty much every modern view of Christianity in every tradition we could imagine. He combated the heresy of the Pelagians. He fought against the schism of the Donatists. We have a ton of his literature still, which is awesome. Like, there's a lot of dudes whose material was lost, but we still have. I think I read that. Among his books, letters, and sermons, there's about 1,000 pieces of literature that we still have access to as far as Augustine's written opus, which is freaking wild. So, yeah, Catholics love him and say Protestants don't understand him. Protestants love him and say Catholics don't understand him. He's a cool guy. So yeah, let's jump in. So, Augustine, or Aurelius Augustinus, was born November 13th, 354 in northern Africa, which was modern-day Algeria. Scholars believe he was of Berber heritage, meaning that although he was a Roman citizen, he was also ethnically black, which, Taylor, I remember you had a problem with earlier. We really did. This was a trap. We just brought Taylor on to just bully him, bro. This is great. Carry on. All right.
Taylor before we started. He was telling us about his awesome career aspirations he has, and we're just like, you thought.
That was such a deep cut. I have no response to that. Like, there's no witty response other than doubling down. Which, like, how do you double down on that?
I don't think you should. All right. Augustine's father was a low-level Roman official who was followed the tradition pagan religion. His mother, though, Monica, was probably a top 5 mom of moms everywhere. She was a devoted Christian, and she would spend many, many tears throughout her life interceding for her beloved son that he would turn to follow Jesus. Augustine just showed that he was a very, very smart dude from a very young age, and so his parents really committed to getting him just the best education possible. So as a young man, he would be sent to the nearby town of Madaura, and then eventually to the cultural hub of Roman Africa, kind of the biggest city in this part of Rome, Carthage. Now, Augustine would often look back on this time of his life as a young man as kind of like his there's a phrase I was going to use, but I realized that may not be a savory one for a Christian podcast. This was kind of his man. It was kind of his kind of a hoe phase, I guess. Yeah. Is that too? Do I have to get that bleeped out? I think that's fine.
I think it's fine.
I think it's fine. This was like he was partying a ton. He was hanging out with the bros. They're probably, drinking, imbibing, probably smoking vapes and ripping zins and all that stuff.
What were they drinking?
I don't know, probably
Hennessy.
Hennessy. Oh my gosh. Probably just some I'm not sure. I don't know the records. But he was just a foolish little goober, bro. He was just a knucklehead. But particularly, and this is kind of going to become this recurring kind of this recurring vice that follows him throughout his life. It's his sexual sin. He's just going to struggle with that for a long time. And so although he kind of hates his studies, and he talks about in his confessions how he doesn't like to study, but he's still very good at it, and he's still very committed to it. So during this time, he's kind of living in reckless debauchery, and he would take on a concubine, and he would have a son with her, and he would kind of commit himself to like some form of monogamy. And then I didn't know this too, because I kind of thought that a concubine was like a slave girl. But I think in this time, having a concubine was essentially, it was a way to have a formally recognized relationship that was committed but didn't have the legal elements that marriage did.
It's like a wedding with a prenup.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was because I think that there were, especially with Augustine being a Roman citizen, which was a big deal, I think there were benefits, and inheritance tends to get tied up when you get married to someone. So it's a really big deal who you get married to. But someone you take on as a concubine is kind of like a live-in partner, basically.
The live-in
is my
girlfriend.
Right.
Test drive before you buy.
Yeah, it's just like that.
Isn't it fascinating, the parallels between modern hedonism and Augustine's early life?
Yeah, really, really not so different, honestly. And I think that's one of the timeless things about Augustine that makes him so relatable. And I think that actually feeds into what makes him such an icon in the church, is that he's not just really sharp theologically, but that his story is so integrated into his theology, and people, I think, resonate with that. But anyways, two things about Augustine's early years that are really interesting. The first is that he's super interested in the art of rhetoric. He wants to be this master of language. He's actually originally going to study to be a lawyer, even though he's never going to follow into that practice. But he just wants to master language. He wants to be able to entice and persuade, and just kind of be this wizard with Latin. And so another thing is that, just like we were kind of saying before, he's very aware, deeply aware of his internal passions, this struggle that he has internally. So even though his mom, Monica, is very much harping on him, dude, stop being a knucklehead, you need to follow Christ the way that I raised you to. The two big problems are, one, as someone who loves rhetoric, he sees the Bible as super basic and not interesting enough for his advanced kind of rhetorical mind. But then on the flip side, this idea that he has something inherently broken inside of him is not something that he can reconcile to a perfect God who makes all things and loves the things that are broken. He just doesn't see the connection there. So these are going to become these big stumbling blocks for him, and kind of how to engage with Christianity. It feels very commonplace, but it also doesn't seem to really connect with this hole that he has in his heart,
It's every young man's experience in the 21st century right now.
I'm telling you, man, he's a timeless man. He's a timeless man.
You grow up posting on r/atheism.
That's just every guy's arc.
And your mom's like, you need to come to church on Sunday morning.
And he's like, Mom, it's so basic, and it doesn't understand me. Oh my gosh!
Your sky daddy doesn't get me.
That actually bothers me, because that is such a basic argument against Christianity. The fact that it's too basic and it doesn't get me is literally where Augustine is coming from. Right. And that does sound like what a 19-year-old boy would have a problem with.
Like the local pastor that knows him and his family probably like loves the kid, and he's like, you're an idiot.
He's like, you don't get me, Pastor Dave.
Yeah, you don't understand what it's like to be young and hormonal.
And so Augustine is going to be drawn to this very interesting, it's kind of like a half religion, half cults sort of philosophy called Manichaeism. And this is a very Gnostic religion that's going to rise up out of Persia in the 3rd century. And it's going to kind of scratch the itches that Augustine has. It's going to offer him this disdain for the internal passions that he struggles with, but it's also going to give him this love for like advanced rhetoric and philosophy that he doesn't feel like Christianity has. It's super Gnostic. It kind of categorizes Jesus as one of many great philosophers who have carried the light. And, you know, like I said, with the Gnosticism part, it's like matter is like this evil thing. And one of the reasons that Augustine enjoys it so much is because Manichaeism basically sees the Old Testament as a very poor reflection of God, but also that it represents God as being kind of the evil demiurge of Gnosticism. So when he reads the Old Testament and sees this like violent, angry dude, and then Manichaeism is like, oh yeah, it's because he's this evil, like matter obsessed being, then he's like, oh, that makes sense all of a sudden. You know, so he's going to follow. No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think some of the core tenets of oh my gosh. Now I'm just looking dumb. I do not represent Gateway Seminary when I mispronounce things. Manichaeism. The asceticism that kind of goes along with it, like the good versus evil. I just want to make sure I'm doing good, and I'm going to abstain from things. Does that sound familiar at all?
No, it's super dualist, but it's also like, is that not like the kind of Andrew Tate, you have to go to the gym 6 times a week, and you have to be a stoic, and you have to enslave your body to all of its passions? Isn't that, I'm feeling that.
I mean, dude, I'll even throw out a more spicier take. That's where Jordan Peterson leans sometimes, man.
Okay.
And I like Jordan Peterson. I do, but like this kind of modern asceticism, the modern stoicism, when it's not rooted in a holy God, you kind of like lose the plot, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's even further tie-ins with Manichaeism being parallel to the new age kind of syncretism that we have today. Like I know so many people who are like, they're taking like a little bit of like Buddhism and a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of paganism, and they kind of like mix it together. And they're coming from this like 21st century with the power of the internet. Like I know the best from every religion.
Right.
It seems like that's what Mani, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. Let's say Mani. It sounds better. It seems like that's what Mani was trying to do, is like draw together all of the predominant teachings of the time and turn it into a Frankenstein's monster of a religion.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talked about, that I've talked about with Jacob during the Justin Martyr episode, was that to be involved in these religions at this point in history, it wasn't just something you could like throw on your Facebook page and like, you know, I left a quote from Mani on my Instagram caption. Like it was it demanded something of you. Like, to be a part of these like sects, you had to like genuinely belong to them, and that you had to live your life a certain kind of way. Whereas it's like the new age side of it is really just to kind of have a more eclectic look to how you put yourself out there. But then the Jordan Peterson thing is all about just, kind of getting your ducks in a row in public. But yeah, it's messy. Nothing new under the sun, boys. That's really it.
Clean your room.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you prove you're a follower now.
Of Justin Peterson.
Justin Peterson.
Did I say Justin? Gosh dang it. I don't care. It flies. I don't represent Gateway Seminary, so I'm fine.
I don't either.
So he's gonna follow in with the Manichaeans for about 7 years, and he's always going to stay a follower. So he's still on the outskirts. He's going to connect and affiliate with them, but he's never going to get really involved, mostly because they just can't answer the questions that he has. And I love, there's like this story that he tells that he has all these questions and he's kind of frustrating the Manichaeans around him, and they're just like, dude, it's all good. Like, there's this guy who's coming, and he is like this sage of wisdom, and his name is Faustus, and he's just gonna blow your socks off. And Augustine talks to him, and the guy's like, yeah, I don't have any answers for your questions. And Augustine's like, all right, I'm done. Like, I'm freaking done with this.
Never meet your heroes, kid.
Yeah, I guess do meet your heroes so they can disappoint you. So he just like super disappointed. And then at this point, this is of course years. He's been involved as a professor of rhetoric for many years, and he's been advancing in his career. And he's going to move to Milan, which is this hugely pivotal moment for his life, because in Milan, he's going to hear about this incredible speaker who is just one of the most masterful speakers around, who he is going to go to, not so much because he cares about his ideas, but because he cares about how he communicates them. And this man's name is Ambrose, who was the bishop of Milan. And Ambrose is a huge figure in Christianity at this time. And so Augustine is basically going to go to this dude and be like, look, I don't really care about this message that you're preaching. I just want to know how you communicate. Because even though Augustine had not really been convinced that Christianity was for him, and he had left Manichaeism behind, he was still not really interested, and he was kind of like flirting with Neoplatonism too. So he kind of just goes to follow Ambrose, and eventually Ambrose's ideas just start clicking for him. And Ambrose, who's this old man, kind of takes young Augustine under his wing and kind of starts discipling him and starts to kind of like gradually teach him about the mysteries of the Christian faith, which is this really, really beautiful kind of like relationship that blossoms out of that. So
it feels like a huge crossover event in church history.
Dude, I love when Titans, it's like one of those moments where like in those old 90s sitcoms when like you see a character from another sitcom who shows up and the studio audience is like, whoa! Yeah, that's how it feels. So I love moments like that. And we got another one coming up here too, which I'm excited about. So while the walls that opposed Augustine's conversion to Christianity were slowly kind of crumbling around him, he also felt once again this deep discomfort within his soul, because he knew that beyond his mind and intellect, he was a sinful dude. He was very much, he felt like a slave to his passions. And even though he was no longer opposed to Christianity on a mental or an intellectual level, he was very intimidated about becoming a Christian, because he felt like he was not going to be able to really lay aside his passions for the sake of the gospel. So for a good while, he just like kind of held his breath, and he kind of soaked in the wisdom about the faith, but he was just too fearful to like really take that dive and become catechized and kind of like brought into the faith.
Not to like overly, analyze the psychology thousands of years later, but it's like I read that he also stayed on the outskirts of Manichaeanism. Like he was,
Yeah.
like he was in it, but like they had like levels basically that you could, very very Gnostic, and he stayed at the auditor level for 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
So it seems like in multiple areas of his life he had commitment issues before Christ.
Yeah. Not to mention he never marries his concubine girlfriend. Yeah. I mean, dude, he just, yeah, like you said, not to like overly psychoanalyze the guy, but he just feels like your kind of traditional overthinker who's like very cerebral and heady, but when it comes to making like these big decisions is kind of intimidated by them. And also I wonder how much his mom's voice just kind of resonated in his head, where he was just like, I don't know if I can really make this call because I know how meaningful this is to her. And I think with the other faiths, he didn't want to embrace them because they weren't Christianity. But I think with Christianity, he was afraid of it because he didn't want to do it poorly. He didn't want to do it the wrong way, you know?
Yeah.
So there's this one fateful day where he's talking with his friends one afternoon, and his friend tells him the story of another special guest appearance, our good friend Anthony the Great, the famous monk who, absent of any higher education, fled to the desert to seek the face of God and had this stellar, shining reputation as this wonderfully virtuous man who performed miracles and was just doing all these things to the beauty and to the glory of God. And suddenly Augustine was just filled with this like bitter shame, because he was like, I put so much pride in being like a learned, educated dude, and this man who has nothing that I have is able to just give everything away and dive completely into the ocean, into the oceans of God's grace. And so he has this moment where he like runs into this garden. He's like crying and like weeping, and he's holding to his chest, just by happenstance, a manuscript that has several of Paul's epistles in it. And he sits under this fig tree and he's just sobbing, and he's just like frustrated with himself that he just can't, make this decision. And off from a distance, he hears the voice of a child prance by, and the child is singing the words, "Take and read, take and read." And when he reflected on it later, he was like, I don't know of any freaking songs that have those words, but he saw it as like an angel or a message from the Lord speaking to him. And so he immediately opened up one of the scripts that he was holding, and it opened him to Romans 13 verses 13 through 14, which goes like this: "Not in riots and drunken parties, not in eroticism and indecencies, not in strife and rivalry, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh in its lusts." And suddenly he was like filled with this like amazing wave of courage, not because he felt like he was strong enough to like repent of his sins, but that in following this command of putting on the Lord Jesus, that would give him what he needed to finally combat these internal passions that he had. And so at that moment, at the age of 33, he submitted himself to catechism, and he would be baptized shortly after. So, yeah.
And therein lies the gospel, man.
Yeah,
like,
seriously.
Somebody who's a committed, practiced, habitual sinner. What do you need to hear?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Put on the Lord Jesus Christ. So after his baptism, Augustine, his son, and his mother are going to sail back to his hometown in northern Africa, and he plans to live like a very quiet Christian monastic life. He does not want to, so he obviously resigns from his position as a teacher, and he's like, dude, I'm going back home. I'm a Christian now, and I just want to live this like peaceful kind of monastic simple life. But pretty soon his life would be hit by a string of tragedies. On the way home, his mom would die, which, as tragic as it was, she got to witness her son's baptism, which she had prayed about for decades. So that was still a really beautiful thing. His son would die shortly after that. And then after connecting with a couple of his close lifelong friends, they would also die. And so he's going to get hit by this kind of string of just like losses all of a sudden as he's entering the faith. And so for a few years, he's going to basically get back home. He's going to sell the majority of his property. He's going to give a lot of the money to the poor. And then he's going to join essentially a small little monastic community in a town called Cassiacum. And he's going to stay there for a few years, living like a pretty simple Christian life.
It's like a retreat almost.
Pretty much, dude. I mean, it really reminds me of Paul in Arabia. Like, it reminds me of Paul being discipled by the Christians before he starts his apostolic ministry. That's kind of what it seems like.
I mean, I respect that choice. I can say as when I was a young man, I like dreamed about wanting to have like the big platform or whatever. And then you just kind of like realize that's not what it's about at all. And you resign from your position at a church and go off to seminary.
Yeah. Dude, the interesting thing that it's going to happen to Augustine is like, he's going to say he's going to first look for success, which he finds. Then he's going to give up his success so that he can live a simple life. But within a few years, he will essentially be ripped out of that simple life so that he can serve in the priesthood. Because literally what happens is he's going to visit his friend in the town of Hippo. And this is like the most voluntold story I've ever heard, but he's literally sitting in the parish as the bishop of Hippo is preaching, and the bishop is basically like, "Oh, this guy's Augustine. He basically says, "Oh, you're going to be a priest now, just so you know. Like I've heard about you. You're the smarty pants who became a Christian and you've been living as a monk. Okay, guess what? Yeah, you're a priest now because we need a priest in this place."
Isn't that how Baptists ordain people these days too?
I was just about to say it, man. Oh, it's so true.
And then Augustine had to carry like 4 sets of chairs to the courtyard for the potluck.
We say, son, you've got the call of a preacher.
You got that anointing on you, young man. And so Augustine pens these words. He pens them talking about his final arrival in faith after the long pursuit. And this is a very famous quote, but I love it. It's from the Book of Confessions that he writes, and it goes, "Late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever new. Late have I loved you. You were within me, but I was outside, and it was there that I searched for you. In my unloveliness, I plunged into the lovely things which you created. You were with me, but I was not with you. Created things kept me from you, yet if they had not been in you, they would not have been at all. You called, you shouted, and you broke through my deafness. You flashed, you shone, and you dispelled my blindness. You breathed your fragrance on me. You drew in breath, and now I pant for you. I have tasted you, now I hunger and thirst for more. You touched, and I burn for your peace." So just like, and this is what I'm saying. This is one of the reasons why I love Augustine, and this is why I think Confessions is such a magnificent classic of like early Christian literature. Is it's literally like a devotional / personal diary / autobiography. Like it's not an autobiography like, when I was 9 I moved to Tubac, and then my dad got a new job. Like 95% of Confessions is written like a prayer, and it's really, really compelling.
I heard a historian claim that he actually invented like the autobiography with Confessions.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. So Yeah, so Augustine's life is basically going to be thrust into some hard labor. What's interesting is that I didn't know this. Priests during this time are essentially become like kind of what a judge would be in community. Like he would kind of be called in to settle conflicts and disputes among people. So he was constantly kind of in the midst of the people and problems and like legal disputes they were in. He was also going to have to get his hands dirty with, dealing with the Pelagians, which was a pretty big heresy that was going to hit, the Donatist schism, which is going to be a huge kind of nightmare that happens in Northern Africa, where essentially there's going to be this big schism of people who decide that they no longer accept any of the priests and pastors who in any way compromised during the time of the Great Persecution. And Augustine is going to help formulate a lot of the theology that's going to kind of combat that. And Augustine formed this, or I won't say formed, I would say he articulated the idea that the sacraments of God are valuable in and of themselves, and they're not valuable because of the person administrating them, which is what the Donatists were saying. That's a very, very quick summary of it. We have a whole episode on the Donatist controversy if you want to listen to that. It's really good.
So much. Yeah. And by the way, I'm so sorry to our listeners. My mic switched, and the recording software we're using doesn't allow me to switch back for some reason. So if it's like really bad now, I apologize. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah, bro, I can hear you fine.
Does my mic still sound good, John Simon?
Yes, Taylor.
Thanks. Just making sure.
Augustine, I didn't realize, like, I was always aware of the fact, always isn't the right word. I've long been aware of the fact that Augustine's theology, and particularly surrounding like original sin, is impactful to Reformed folk. But I didn't realize just how much his ecclesiology influenced not just the Reformed, but I would say a lot of the modern church, in particular the Reformed church. But like you said, with his articulation of what makes the sacraments efficacious is, God and not man. That's huge in Reformed ecclesiology. But also, I don't know if you were going to talk about this, but his distinction of the visible and the invisible church, really important as well, which is that the visible church is just that. It's what you can see. And this is important both in Reformed ecclesiology. If you're baptizing babies, having a visible and invisible church distinction is an important distinction. It's also important in like Baptist congregational ecclesiology as well, which Taylor could talk more about if he wanted to. But I mean, that's just like a really critical piece of just being able to think through what is the church and who are God's elect, who are those who we would expect to see in the kingdom of heaven, and what is the kingdom of God on earth. Those are really, really important distinctions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of the distinctions are going to come from his second most popular book, City of God, which kind of seems like it kind of lays down the blueprint of what Luther would summarize into the two kingdom theory, that you can be a citizen of earth or of Rome, and also of God, and kind of like what your earthly citizenship means versus your heavenly citizenship, which was very, very pressing for Augustine to talk about, because near the end of his life, Rome is essentially on its last
legs. The world
is
ending.
Right.
That's what I don't think we can appreciate fully, because we can't empathize with that in our current like political climate. Like, we can act like the world is ending, but like for Augustine, the world was like literally ending. Like Rome had fallen. And that's part of what sparks him to write City of God and start getting people thinking about, where's your citizenship? What does this mean? Yeah, I feel for the guy. It's like the Lord really was preparing him to be kind of this monumental force to help hold the church together during this time. Mm. I mean, pagans ripped through and like won, right? Mm. So it's kind of, we can poke fun at the post mills here, right, Tommy? but think about like pre-World War I, like post-millennialism is like on the rise, and then we see the worst atrocities that we can commit against each other. We're back to historic premillennialism. I think there is something to be said for that in times of peace, where our eschatology changes, and I think that's probably what Augustine and all his people and all his different churches were dealing with, like a paradigm shifting event. That he is now like the wise sage that everyone wants pastoral advice from. Yeah. So this was also correlate pretty well with the end of Augustine's life, because the Vandals are basically going to be breaking into the Roman cities in northern Africa around the time that Augustine is going to start getting sick. And what I love is that some of the last letters that we have from Augustine from the end of his life are him writing to fellow priests and bishops in areas near him, basically saying, do not evacuate, like stay with your people. And if the Vandals come, then die with them, but do not abandon your people, essentially. And Augustine would die about 10 months before the Vandals would completely sack northern Africa, which I think is a cool grace that God kind of showed there. But I mean, Augustine has one of those lives that and I love what you said, Thomas, and I think you hinted at it too, Taylor. Like, I one of the things I don't like about kind of Christian celebrity culture is kind of being like, oh man, you only get an Augustine once every 1,000 years. And it's like, nah, but that's not really it though. Like, we recognize Augustine as someone that God used to fortify his church, to bring a lot of beautiful ideas and concepts into light. Like, to just look at Augustine like he was just this spectacular, relic of Christianity, I think would be against what Augustine would want to be remembered as. I think a better way of seeing it is, wow, look at how God used the intersection of history and culture and time and this one random Berber dude to just like create such a beautiful thing that would feed the church for so many centuries after. Yeah, it's like God's sovereign hand was working through his life to create and help like lead him to the place that he needed to be. So like, free will discussions, all of that. Obviously humans have free will. God would have raised up somebody else, but like Augustine went along with it. He didn't fight it when the church tried to ordain him. I mean, maybe a little bit. Eventually he got ordained, right? That's the point. So, he was humble throughout the process. And I think that there is something for three young guys with aspirations for ministry or are currently serving in ministry. Like, if we're being honest, we would love the idea of being like, God, use me to help lead the United States in revival. Like, oh, yeah.
And then you die 10 months before, I don't know, the new Soviet Union like tears into Arizona or something.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. But I think there's a lesson there for us of like walking back and just saying like, I'm just going to try to be as humble as possible and then allow the Lord to appoint you to your station. And that sounds like a platitude, but I do not think that that's a platitude.
Yeah. That is a very Baptist-y thing, mostly because it's got the freaking military connotation. Like the Lord would appoint you to your station, hand you your gun to be a soldier of the Lord, which I'm not opposed to. I just think it's Baptist-y, and I think it's funny. That's all.
Help it, man. I can't.
I'm not mad. It's okay. It's good.
I have been in a Southern Baptist church basically every Sunday of my life since I was like 2 weeks old.
Hey, there's no, as a cool guy once told me, no isms, no schisms in these, what is it? No schisms in the isms. Do you know what I'm talking about, Tommy, right?
No schism in the tism.
It's not the tism, bro.
I drank so much Welch's grape juice in my life.
This man bleeds Welch's.
Dude, the first time, okay, little sidebar. The first time I visited a non-Baptist church, I went with my friend to his Lutheran church, and they did communion at the end. And I had no idea. I was like, wait a second. They're using alcohol.
Oh man, yeah. Honestly, I don't think I ever had communion with alcohol until I was probably well into my 20s. So yeah, I was Baptist flavored way before I was. Yeah,
were you even saved?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, hey, this is the story of Augustine. Any closing remarks, Thomas? Not Taylor.
You're done.
I think it's just incredible how much you talked about this earlier, but just the sheer amount of stuff that we have from Augustine, his writings for that time is incredible. And I was reading when the Vandals sacked his city, they came back and burned it. They did not burn his library, which is really
which is amazing. Yeah, no, that's such a cool little detail. Yeah,
see God's hand in that as well. But yeah, I think he's a wealth of information and learning for us in several categories. It seems like a lot of the characters that we've covered in church history, a lot of these saints have been, usually they're like one thing or the other, right? Like they're a poet or they're just a pastor's pastor, or they're a monumental theologian, and he's kind of all of the above.
Yes.
Yeah.
Renaissance man of the 4th century, and it's really cool.
He's like spiritually ambidextrous. It's like super cool. Gosh dang, dude, I was gonna say something else, but I lost it. Well, Taylor, great job.
Hey, thanks, man.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, if we ever make another podcast, like a different one, not this one, we'll bring you back on.
Oh,
it'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd love to be there. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Hey, well, listener, thank you guys so much for listening. If you get the time, which I'm sure you've got a couple minutes or maybe 30 seconds to do so, make us a little review. Maybe throw some comments on Spotify. Maybe follow us on our Instagram at Church History, 4 Chumps. We just love to connect more, and we want to make it easier for more people to find us because we want to get more listeners because we're kind of vain. I don't know.
We are not learning from Augustine here, John Simon.
Dude, I'm in my pre-Milan phase, bro. That's just it. I'm just not there yet.
Pre-Milan era.
Yeah.
I want to thank our sponsors, Welch's Grape Juice.
Oh gosh. I'd like to thank you guys. All right. We'll see you guys later. Bye.
God bless.